Listen to a lecture given by Dr. Pendleton to students on a business administration course and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello. This afternoon I'm going to begin by outlining some of the main changes that have occurred in the labour market and in working practices over the last 20 years. One of the most significant changes has been the vast move, especially in industrialised countries, from manufacturing to service industries. Although this has freed many people from heavy and repetitive work in factories, many people find their work in service industries equally boring and just as badly paid. Another important change has been that most people no longer expect to spend most of their working lives with the same company or organisation. As a result, people set themselves objectives which they work towards, and they use the various jobs they do and the different companies they work for as steps towards these objectives. For individual workers, I think this has helped them become more independent and given them more control over their lives. In most companies, the management team has become less hierarchical. This is often called downsizing or delayering. In other words, there are fewer managers and fewer levels of management. As a result, there are not so many opportunities for promotion, and people often feel frustrated because they find themselves at the same level for many years without the chance to rise in the company. Competition from new products and from different parts of the world means that nowadays companies have to adapt very fast to changing markets, and this requires them to be very flexible. Increasingly, this means they don't employ workers directly, but employ other small specialist companies or individuals to do the job when they need them. This means they don't have the expense of employing workers when they don't need them. I believe that for workers who are subcontracted, there are various gains. They're often better paid for the work they do. They work in smaller, more human organisations, and they're able to organise their working lives in ways which suit them, instead of having to fit into the routines of a large company. Of course, the biggest areas of change have come with the technological revolution. Workers now have the chance to go job hunting on the World Wide Web, so they have more opportunities to find better or more suitable jobs. Statistics show that generally people work much harder than in the past, with much longer hours. New technologies are largely responsible for this, especially mobile phones and beepers or pagers. These things force employees to stay in contact with their offices even in their free time and at weekends. I think this is a pity, as people need to be able to relax and have time for themselves. Another effect of technological change is that jobs evolve very rapidly, and workers have to be continually going on training courses in order to remain employable. As a university teacher, I can hardly complain about this, but it can place an enormous strain on workers if they're obliged to retrain for jobs well into their late 50s when they're getting close to retirement. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Before you listen to the second part of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the rest of the lecture and answer questions 7 to 10.
New technology and global competition have, between them, meant that the life cycle of products isn't nearly as long as it used to be. This has had a profound effect on companies and on the way we work. In order to cope with sudden changes in the market, companies need much greater flexibility from their staff. As a result, large numbers of tenured or permanent jobs have disappeared. Apart from university lecturers like myself, few people can expect nowadays to have a job for life, and temporary short-term employment has become the norm for many people. However, we have to be positive. One wonderful change which has come out of the technological revolution is the opportunity for office workers to telecommute, that is, for them to work from home with their computer and their modem. This enables them to organise their working lives around their families and cut out the long journeys to and from work, which are the bane of most office workers' lives.
That is the end of part 1. Now turns to part 2.
You hear a talk by a counsellor from the University of New South Wales, who will introduce some useful facilities and services on the campus. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the University of New South Wales. The first thing I'd like to do at today's orientation session is get you all oriented. That means tell you the location of some useful facilities and services. So, first of all, take out the maps we gave you all as you came in the door. The map is the big yellow sheet of paper. As you can see on the map, north is at the top, south at the bottom, etc. Which way is north? Well, look through that window on my left, your right. See the rising sun? That would have to be east. So north must be directly behind me. Now, we're at the campus main gate. The recreational facilities are on my right hand, and its opposite is the student centre. No questions? Good. Pretty easy, right? Okay, did everyone eat breakfast at the student food service this morning? Was the food good? Yes, I am joking. I've eaten there too. So, after a meal like that, you must be eager to go to a doctor, right? Well, I have good news for you. The Student Health Centre is located about half a kilometre straight north of here. Look on your maps. You see the street on the east side of this building? Ned Kelly Avenue? Just follow that about 500 metres and the health centre will be on your left at the 3rd cross street. Now, I know you all just got here, so you must be wondering how to tell your folks you've arrived safely, how much you miss the dog, and how you already need more money. If you don't have an iPhone, you probably are wondering where to find a computer. Well, I have good news. If you go straight out of its door and walk down the garden street, you'll see the internet unit on your left side, just next to the gym. The hours are posted on the door and the computers are free, but you must bring your student ID card with you. Like I tell everyone, if you need help with anything, you can probably find right here in the student centre. Do you see the 4 buildings there between the student centre and the library? Those are the dormitories. The men's dorms are the 2 on the south, the women's the 2 on the north. Okay, I'm sorry to have to tell you, but the university has been doing a lot of repairs and remodelling and it's not all done yet. So there may be some small problems with your dorm rooms. Maybe the window doesn't open. Maybe an air conditioner is missing or does not work. If there are any problems, you can go to the complaint office, which is right beside the teaching building between the Parker Street and the Cramer Street. Just tell them your problem and they should have it fixed by the time you graduate in 4 years. I'm joking, but please be patient. There are a lot of little things they need to take care of. Tired of the school food? No? Give it a week. Or maybe you just need a place to get coffee in the wee hours of the night during one of those marathon study sessions. Either way, you definitely have to check out the little cafe just past the women's dormitories. They've got free Wi-Fi, so a lot of students saddle up with coffee and a bagel for hours on end to get work done.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
As for the dorm rooms, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is the rooms are small and you'll probably be sharing space with at least 3 other students. The good news is that each room has its own bathroom. What's good about sharing a bathroom with 3 strangers? Good question. Okay, call it bad news and worse news. Hey, maybe try this for good news. Each dorm has a kitchen. If you want to make snacks or meals, you can do it there. You can buy food containers at any campus convenience store, so you can store your food in the kitchen. But a word of warning, you should definitely write your name on your food containers. Sad to say, there are food thieves among your fellow students. Speaking of thieves, a word about security. I mean, this is Australia, and we do get drunken bushrangers wandering onto campus. Each of you will be given a key for your dorm room. Don't lose it. You have to pay for any replacement and fill out a bunch of papers too. Red tape, huh? Your key does not work for the front door of your dorm, however. To the right of each door, there's a keypad with numbers. When you move in, they will tell you the code you use to enter the door. Please do not tell the code to people who do not live in the dorm. Let's see. Have I forgotten anything? Oh yes, most of you are not rich, correct? So when your clothes get dirty, you can't just throw them away and buy new ones. That means you have to learn to do laundry. Or, men, that means you have to hurry up and get married. If you decide to wash those clothes and not get married, there are laundries in each dorm. Where? Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. The laundry for each dorm is in the basement. Some real good news this time if you're a student, it is free. You do have to buy your own soap, however. The laundry closes, by the by, at 11:30. And now that I've mentioned 11:30, please remember, the dorm doors are locked at 11:30 p.m. Your code will not work. If you want to get in, you'll have to call the night watchman. Don't worry, you can get that number at the dorm office. Yes, the dorm office and the complaint office are the same office. All right then. Before we continue, are there any questions?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear a discussion between two students, David and Jane, and their tutor, Dr. Wilson, about their group research project into local history. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hello, David, Jane.
Hello.
Hi.
So, how's the local history project going? Are you making good progress?
Yes and no.
Oh?
Well, we anticipated problems of various kinds. None of the group has much experience of collaborating on projects. But we spent some time discussing how to go about it and thrashed out what seemed a useful approach. But it seems that Jane and I are the only ones actually following the plan. That's meant that the whole project has been lacking coordination, and so we've fallen behind our schedule.
I see. That's tricky.
Yes, it is. We felt that the targets had been defined, so we'd all know what to deal with. But looking back, we probably should have really specified individual responsibilities. As it is, we only have a loose sense of what should be done by who.
Well, this is quite a common problem, actually. I take it that you've had enough group meetings, so you're looking for an effective solution. If you go to the resource center, I think you'd find the advice service they provide there helpful at this point.
Thanks. We'll go there later.
On a specific note, I think we've got carried away with recruiting people to interview at the expense of building up the reference section, which I don't think is going to be solid enough. Do you think that'll be a major problem?
I'd have to see how much is there to be sure. But, well, you'll have to be pragmatic at this point, I think. What you'd better do is ensure your methodology is really strong, so at least you can't be faulted on that front. Then, if people challenge your results, at least you've carefully reported how you reach them. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So?
Yes, I think one resource in relation to that we haven't exploited as fully as we might is the internet. I've taken a lot of journals off the library shelves to go through, but actually there are websites where you can call up lists of approaches or data sets really quickly.
I think that's a good idea, yes.
Now you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 27 to 30.
Now, let's think about the field trip and at least make sure that goes as well as possible. You're going to Cambridge on the 22nd.
The Monday, yes.
It's quite soon now.
And in the morning, you'll be traveling and then getting settled into the hotel.
Uh-huh.
But you need to get down to work after lunch, of course. Now, I've arranged for you to have a look at some useful visual material, especially photographs and old magazines and newspapers, which is included in an exhibition at the library in the university.
That sounds like a good starting point.
There's quite a lot on show, so that'll occupy most of the afternoon. Then the following morning, I want you to go and talk to someone in the city library. His name's Jarvis Gregson. He works in the education section there, and he's an expert on the area's history. Don't, of course, forget to take a tape recorder with you, so that you can record what he tells you.
Mm-hmm.
And to have our questions ready.
Indeed. Okay, and the afternoon's free for you to wander around, get the feel of the place.
Do some sightseeing.
As you wish. It's a beautiful city. But it's back to work on Wednesday morning. Concentrate on the central area and walk around methodically. You'll have the plans I'm getting ready for you from different periods, and your task is to compare those with the makeup of the city today. Make notes on how different kinds of shops and businesses have grown up, what's gone, and so on.
I hope the weather's good.
Yes, and in the afternoon, I want you to think about producing your own records, along the lines of the ones in the city library's archives. The history of the castle is very important to the city's development, so use a camera to get some pictures that reflect that if you can, showing it in relation to the buildings and spaces around it.
We'll try. And when do we travel back?
That's up to you. You can either decide to...
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear a lecture on a traditional Japanese form of stitching called sashiko. First, you have some time to look at questions.
Good morning, everyone. As you know, we're continuing with the part of the textile course where we look at some different types of stitching or stitching techniques. And today, we're looking at one that comes from Japan. It's called sashiko. Now, what does that word mean? Well, it translates as little stitches. And in its modern form, you can see from these pictures, it produces a very beautiful decorative design on things like cushions, curtains and quilted covers, all produced by hand, of course, and many sold in shops these days. But sashiko began long ago, and its Japanese origins were much more functional than this. It started among farming communities in mountain villages in the north of Japan's main island. Centuries ago, transport was difficult in these places, and the bitter climate made it hard to grow fibre plants for spinning and weaving into warm cloth. Also, there were no sheep in Japan at this time, so no wool either. And this meant that people were left with a locally produced material called asa that was hard-wearing but not very warm. So, what they did was to dye this local fabric blue, because the dye was thought to strengthen the fibres. And they solved the problem of warmth by stitching together many layers of this cloth. In this way, they produced clothes that were warm but not too bulky. It was done with a white, heavy thread, so there were many shades of blue cloth, light and dark, and white stitching. And so a typical look or image was created, like this. They used designs based on traditional Japanese patterns that had their own names, such as sea wave, perhaps to reflect the wavy effect of the design. Here's another example. Now, each garment that was made at this time was planned for a specific purpose. So, for example, waistcoats were heavily stitched on the back and shoulders if they were going to be worn while carrying heavy baskets. And it wasn't only country people who relied on sashiko clothing. In Japanese towns, firemen dressed for duty in sashiko-stitched garments, jackets, trousers, hoods and gloves, which were soaked with water to protect them. So, the point here is that sashiko clothing was essential for survival at one time. And even though making things in this way took up many hours for people who also had to work, do household tasks and so on, it was a vital skill. The wife of someone like a farmer, for instance, had to spend time making clothes, and she would do the stitching without a frame or structural support. And the garments, once you put them on, were flexible and moulded themselves to the wearer. If you look at a genuine sashiko garment today, then you can see the evidence of wear and get a feel for the shape of the wearer's body, which is fascinating. Then, in 1895, traditional life changed, and sashiko was no longer necessary because rail travel reached northern Japan, and warm textiles could then be imported. However, since the 1970s, sashiko has been revived in Japan and has also been taken up by quilters and embroiderers in the USA and the UK. Nowadays, the designs are a little different. There are vertical and horizontal stripes, for example, or the stitches can be arranged to produce a diamond effect. Here we are. Similar fabrics to those used traditionally can be found in modern furnishing or dressmaking departments, or from suppliers, so that the traditional appearance of a sashiko item has been maintained. Now, there are exhibitions of ancient sashiko items, but the disappointing thing is this. While old pots and ceramics are considered to be treasures and preserved even with cracks, ancient garments made by poor village women have not been given such a high value, and, sadly, many of them have been thrown away, rather than getting the attention of collectors. This is a pity, because they say a great deal about how people once lived and about their technical skill. And it's no coincidence that sashiko has now become a pastime on an international level.
That is the end of part 4.